This conference will now be recorded.
All right. It is 6 o'clock. The meeting of the Rome City Council will come to order. This is Thursday, August 24th. Ms. King is on the way, I understand. But we do have a quorum, so we'll go ahead and get started. We'll start out with our invocation. Pastor Van Zant, please.
Bow your heads and close your eyes and let's pray. Dear Father, I thank you for this day and I thank you for everything that you bless us with. I thank you for this city and I pray that you'll please us continue to prosper and continue to lead those that are in charge of it, Father. I pray that you'll please us to place your hand upon our city council members and our elected officials, Lord. And I pray that you'll please us allow them to determine the correct process for this city as we continue to grow. Lord, I pray that you'll please us be with the first responders as well. I pray that you'll please us be with Chief Divas and Chief Esses. And I pray that you'll please us allow them to make the right judgment calls, and I pray that you'll put a hedge of protection around them as well as their men as they continue to serve this great city. And I pray that you'll please us allow us to be law-abiding citizens here, and just allow us to continue to stay safe during this extreme heat. We're so thankful for everything that you bless us with. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll move on to public comments. The council is not permitted to take action on or discuss any comments made to the council at this time concerning an item not listed on the agenda. However, a council member or mayor may make a statement of fact regarding the item, make a statement concerning the policy regarding the item, and/or may propose that the item be placed on a future agenda or direct the city administrator to contact the individual to address. If you are attending the meeting via live streaming, if you're attending the meeting via live streaming and you would like to make a public comment, you must email the city secretary at citysecretary@cityofrome.com prior to 4 p.m. on the day of meeting and must identify each subject you plan to present to be recognized. If the writer of a public comment is unable to read their own comment, it should be given to a friend, family member, or associate that is able to attend in person and read the statement in their stead. Public comments made in person require the speaker to submit the sign-up form to the city secretary prior to the meeting, and the form must identify each subject the speaker plans to present. A statement of no more than 3 minutes may be made. There will be no yielding of time to another person. Comments should be directed to the entire council, not individual members. Engaging in verbal attacks or comments intended to insult, abuse, malign, or slander any individuals shall be cause for termination of time privileges and removal from council chambers.
We have two speakers, Mayor. The first one is Lisa Wilson on salaries, budget, tax rates, certifications, and credentials.
Somebody was talking to me. Can y'all hear this? Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm speaking for Lisa Wilson, 240 West First, Rome. My topics are salaries, budget, tax rates, certifications, and credentials. Residents would like to know when and how do you plan to increase the city's income to cover the large salary increases which have been given? Why are we comparing salary on charts and graphs with cities which do not compare with our tax base or population? Citizens under open records, you can get a copy of these outrageous salary contracts and see what all concessions show up on them. You need to hold the council accountable. The recent Wise County Messenger listed salaries of various county officials, county judge, district attorney, sheriff. Why are Rome salaries so much higher than our county? Although I appreciate that our staff and department heads service and what they do for us, but during this budget time, we need to be more responsible with the citizens' money. Before the budget is formally adopted, consider the residents and be extremely frugal. After all, we are all reacting to this current economic condition. As I said recently on social media, citizens are noticing the dollar sign and have more questions than answers. Certifications and credentials. How can citizens be assured that the individuals that are drawing these large salaries and ones seeking employment here meet these requirements? On tonight's agenda, it's the salary for the fire chief position. Even with his prior work history, council please validate his certifications and credentials. Not that he's not doing a good job, but just validate what the state says we need. Transparency, in my opinion, is still lacking. Residents are still confused a little bit and need more details. The tax rate formula is complicated, but pay attention to it and let your mayor or your council person know and ask how it will affect you. Just food for thought. Also, keep thinking about a forensic audit. Thanks for your time.
You have another one?
This would be Miss Shirley Mize. She would like to speak on number 1, number 2, number 4, and a letter.
Good evening. My name is Shirley Mize. I live at 170 Russell Street. And concerning number 1, the salary review for our fire chief, I think he does a great job. I think he's living here. I do think that people deserve pay for what they're worth. I don't think our town's big enough yet. I did a comparison of population, and Boyd has 1,538 people. Rome has 1,839, and these are all of 2022. Decatur has 7,206. Roanoke has 9,943. Justin has 5,597. Southlake has 31,102. Haslett has 2,805. New Fairview has 1,507. Alboyd has 1,508, and Northlake has 8,827. So I think that we need to get our comparisons in order of how we're doing our analysis based upon the population. That would be what these people are covering in our area in most cases. On the Aurora request for help on getting the municipal court citations done through our court system, I have concern on what it's going to cost. We have a court that we have a judge, the paper trail that we have a clerk that takes care of setting everything up for the court system. We have collections, we have notices, and we have payment to the city. Now, system we pay for. Number 4 is the budget. On the budget actuals that she is comparing right now are for 2021. Right now, we should be comparing our actuals for 2022 and 2023 with a adjustment if it's needed, if it's not finished up by the end of the year-end process. So what she has here on our budget is totally oranges and apples. You do not know what money we have in life here in our city. We don't know what our carryover is. We should carry over money and use it for other projects for the following year, but we don't even know what that is. So I'm not sure how we can do this budget, not knowing what the true number is. We had a rate increase for water and wastewater, and that was supposed to take care of some of our infrastructure or issues that we have in the city. But yet, some of that's not going to be done. And I do have a letter from John Corning that talks about the issues that we had in life here in our state and with the Capitol. So hopefully, we need to really look at what we're doing to our citizens and look at our tax rate above and beyond here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Miles. Anything else?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Council have any announcements? City offices will be closed for observance of Labor Day on September 4th, 2023. Cybersecurity training requirements due by August 31st, 2023. And a city council meeting September 14th, 2023 at 6 p.m., which will also include the public hearing on the budget. And so we've got the consent agenda coming next. Minutes of city council regular session dated August 10th, 2023. Have a motion to accept.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And go to regular agenda. One, salary review for the fire chief position. Councilmember King.
We just have a recap. I was listening to the concerns at the last council meeting that were presented, and I also appreciate the input from Ms. Mize today. So I would like a recap on what exactly went into the decision to make the chief's salary be $6,500, a raise of $6,500 instead of going ahead.
So I know that the conversation came up when we were talking about this the last time or the first time when Mrs. Ty brought it up, and I don't know how we arrived at the amount of $77,000 for the fire chief's position when it was so out of line with what the other department heads and the other chiefs have been making. So that was brought forward. One of the conversation pieces was that he's been here less than a year, so should we look at splitting it in half, the move from the 77 to what the other department heads were making? But I don't think council took into account that they would get such a seasoned person that is so hands-on in the position and puts in as many hours as he has to put in to make sure that the community is safe. So at that time, I did not have the salary survey and the position pay scales completed. And so Mr. Loftus wanted to take a look at that as well and have more information before a final decision was made on that. So, and I don't recall exactly which council meeting when we made that change, but it was 2 or 3 council meetings ago. And so at that point, council made the decision to kind of meet in the middle until they could get some additional information. And so at the last meeting, I brought back the pay scale information as it relates to all the positions within the city. I also went into great detail as to how we pulled that information together and how we did the survey to try and control for some of the things that have been brought up by people in the comment section, because we're aware that there's concern. I also know this is a subject that's been discussed in this city for many years, salary for employees. So I'm trying to move us towards a more standardized approach on salaries that is competitive, because we are going to start to lose staff, and we've lost several over the past 2 or 3 years, not always due to salary, but sometimes. And that kind of brings us back around to where we are today.
Okay. So something that you hit on as far as being a very involved chief. I know that in many cities, municipalities, the chief may direct, but they are not on the front lines fighting fires. Our chief is responding to accidents solely on his own by himself. He is fighting fires. He is going in and spending hours fighting fires, sometimes with just 3 other individuals. So, Mr. Loftus, you made a comment at the last meeting that said you thought that the salary had something to do with the comment that you made. I don't know what that was, but I'm asking that council reconsider the salary of the fire chief tonight.
I really have no issue with paying anyone a competitive salary. And I thought we'd already voted on that, actually. And what I do have an issue with is the process that was used for this area. I'm hoping that the new midpoint system, that we can refine that to perhaps have a little more organized situation next year. And that's what
When is the midpoint system to take effect?
We don't even have that on the radar yet. We're just trying to get to the minimum. And in some of our positions, we're not even there yet. It's going to be a multi-year step into that as revenues change and as we start to bring in commercial development and have other expansion in our tax base, then we can look at that from a holistic manner, but we're not there yet. For instance, the minimum on a fire chief's position, from what I have gathered thus far, is $93,349. Your current department heads are making $85,995. They all have extensive credentialing and or experience in their field, and they are all what I call working directors, managers. They are in the trenches, they are digging the ditches, they are tending to the sewer problems, the water problems, they are responding to calls, in some instances patrolling. I've been on fires where the chief is on the top of the roof of the house tending to that. So we are using our department heads in a different way than some of these other cities, and we're asking more of them for less compensation.
Can you also explain why we don't compare an 1,800 population in the middle of nowhere to our city?
Yes, so when you're doing these type of salary surveys and you're putting this information together, you're looking to have a range of comparables, some that are close to your size, some that are in your neighborhood, and some that you will be growing into over the next bit of time. But any city in this area has the unique position, which is sometimes beneficial and sometimes challenging, that you're this close to the metroplex. I can tell you that we have police officers now that are making about $55,000 a year that could go to another city and make 85 or 90 tomorrow. They like the small town atmosphere. They like being out here. They want to be a part of this community that's growing, so they're investing in that now, looking for where we're going to be in the future. So you cannot just pick a city that is down by Beaumont or on the coast that has the exact same population size that we do, because they're not dealing with the same issues that we're dealing with. No city is ever going to be an apple and an apple comparison on anything that we do, because their officers may work different shifts, they may have different equipment, they may have other benefits that come along in their package that are different. You may have, from the standpoint of the chief's position, as we said, most chiefs I know in his role are mostly administrative. They're doing budget hearings, they are participating in things of that nature, and he's doing all that and then some. Same thing for your police chief. It's part and parcel of being a small city that's on the grow. But the proposal that I've put forward is not, and to Mr. Loftus' point, he's correct, at some point we're going to have to address a pay policy for the city, where you all as council, whether you're still in these seats or someone else is, has to give us a policy to shoot for. A lot of cities that I've worked for try to stay within 3 to 5% of the midpoint. They feel that's competitive. I can tell you the midpoint for the fire chief's position is $109,000. We don't have that funding at the moment to get there. but I would ask that we pay competitively for what we're getting, because we do have great folks. We are asking a lot of them, and we are not paying competitive salaries. And I know this has been discussed long before I got here. So I'm trying to put some parameters around this to give you some actual data that can be used and hopefully remove some of the emotional concerns, because I know that that can get to be very difficult. For instance, when I was younger in this field, I used to be a municipal court administrator, and I never could understand why I could call North Richland Hills or another city and their administrator was making $10,000 or $15,000 more than I was. Well, that's the actual salary, which you cannot use to set up your minimum, your midpoint, and your maximum. You have to use the range, because that person may have been in that job for 15 years. They may have certifications that I didn't have, but that is a challenge in normalizing these numbers. I did not use actuals in any of our calculations because it does skew what we're doing. I have mentioned to council before that Hazlitt's not a good comparable. We're going to need to look at that as we continue to move forward. We have a city like Roanoke in our comparable because one day Rome is very likely going to be Roanoke. Justin is another city that we're looking at. They are very close to us. They are comparable in a lot of ways. And this is the trajectory that this city's going on. We also included Boyd and Decatur and Bridgeport because those are definitely cities that we lose employees to. They're all in Wise County. You need someone within your general jurisdiction that you are comparing to. Alvord is not going to be a comparable. Neither is Newark at this time. They will grow, and at some point we will want to include Newark in our survey, but we're not there yet. Aurora has 1.5 employee. There's no comparables. So it's a little bit of a challenging process at this time, and it's often misunderstood from the standpoint of how you get to the numbers and how you actually administer the plan. But back to Mr. Loftus's point on the mid, we're nowhere near that. It's not even on the horizon, but it needs to be in 2 or 3 years.
Would you also explain one more time to the council the difference between the nighttime population and the daytime?
So this is often confusing for small cities, especially as they grow. You have what we call nighttime population of approximately 1,900 individuals who live here year round. Your daytime population swells to, I don't have a number yet because we don't have a traffic counting system. We don't have the other things, but you have tens of thousands of cars that go through this community every day that regardless of whether they lay their head in a bed and sleep here at night, you have to provide services to them. Police, fire, EMS, public works to some extent. So you have to consider not just your nighttime population, but your daytime population. We also have a contiguous property that's about to have between 7,000 and 10,000 homes. That is going to draw on your staff, regardless of whether they are in our city limits or not. We field numerous calls each day and each week from developers over there, from people who are upset about their water, from people who don't understand they're not within the city limits of Rome. So we are still providing those services regardless of whether or not they are within our proper city boundaries. You have to take all those variables into account when you're making your decisions for your staff. Because if you don't, I will promise you, cities around you are going to, and you will not maintain staff. I'm sure we've all heard that anytime you have turnover, it is costly for any organization. It doesn't matter if it's a municipality, if it's a private business, but especially when you have turnover in your executive level positions. And in the past couple of years, we've had some significant turnover. We lost the fire chief, we lost the public works director, and we lost the city administrator. All of those cost money. I know we've discussed that here before as well. Then when you go and you look at the next level and say Julie in the front desk found another job, or Christy found another court, and they have the longevity. They're the top between Chris and Julie and Christy. Those are the 3 that have been here the longest. So your institutional knowledge walks out the door. People will continue to stay here with us and continue to invest in us if they see that council's making an effort to compensate them fairly. If they don't feel like that's occurring, they will leave. And frankly, any of you in any position in any company would leave if you didn't think you were being compensated fairly, if it is long term.
I know they didn't prepare a spiel for this, but I'm curious to hear what the chief of police and what the fire chief would say the impact of the 287 thoroughfare coming through Rome has on their day-to-day operations.
Well, for my guys, we answer quite a few calls. I have requested a traffic survey from TxDOT. I requested it in March. I have followed up with about 4 emails re-requesting that traffic survey with no luck just yet. I did find a traffic survey. It wouldn't be good for the highway, but it would be good for Main Street, which gets pretty clogged in the afternoon and in the morning. I'm looking at a traffic survey device I used in my former city that I have a working knowledge of. It's going to cost money to get it, but it could be used by Public Works as well as us and the city administrator when she needs to know information like that. We may not get a ton of calls right now, but we are dealing with a lot of traffic and people. It is on my probably 2 to 5 year plan to add police motorcycle officers to work traffic for us, which would, when this does kick off and we do start getting a lot of calls, that would free them up, because traffic safety is, when I recruit to fill positions here, I always tell them traffic crashes are our bread and butter. We work more fatalities here than I worked in my previous city, which was 45,000 people. We work more fatalities here. I tell officers that are going to come work for me here, if you don't like working crashes, this may not be the city for you. So we deal with those. I've got a great group of guys, and right now we have a great team over there. But the future does look pretty challenging.
I don't have the exact numbers how many vehicle crashes we have out on 287 and 114. Just in the past, probably just in the past 3 weeks or since August, we've already had fatality. We've had one flown out. We've had 2 rollovers. Out of those rollovers, one of them I made by myself with traffic bearing down on me in the morning. So I'm grateful that y'all provided me 2 more full-timers. Now they still will be by themselves, so we're trying to get part-time to fill those positions to help them out. We also have probably 2 to 5 crashes on 287 every week to 2 weeks out on the highway, and between 3:30 and 6:30, almost every afternoon, we get a vehicle crash. I don't know what time it is now. That might be one. 2 or about maybe 10 days ago, I worked a vehicle fire. Worked a vehicle fire by myself, had to set up cones, had to set the engine, had to go get my gear, had to come back, make sure traffic wasn't going to run me over, set the pump, charge the hose, and then put the fire out. And PD couldn't get there as quick as they could because of the traffic itself, because it was rush hour morning traffic. And like city administrator said, we have tens of thousands of people coming through here. And as Chief Davis says, it's not just the wrecks, it's what you see at the wrecks that bother you too. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff happens on 287, 114, and it's just going to get worse. It's not going to get any better.
Thank you, Chief. I know you're busy and sounds like you may be needed.
Actually, I got 2 on that, so I'm ecstatic.
Okay.
And even though we didn't ask this question, I can tell you that from having worked in municipal court for many years, anytime you have a construction zone set up on a major highway through your city, because they lower the speed limits and they have all of the ancillary redirection of traffic and other things, that you're going to see an increase in not only accidents but also the citations that are issued, because people just sometimes they're going too fast and they have an accident. So that will impact us as well. I do know that that's a good question, and I appreciate you asking that, and it will likely start sooner than we think from the standpoint of the project.
One thing to consider also is Rolling V with Blue Stem and Reunion. They aren't in our city. They're under ETJ, but they can't get to that area without coming through our city. 3433 all the way to Newark is policed and service provided by the Rome Police Department. So every one of those citizens uses our services as they come and go from home to school to work and then back home again. And last time I checked with the developer, they were expecting 400 homes to be occupied by the end of this year, which if you do the math, that's about 1,200 people. And they expect 400 to 500 occupied homes every year for the next 10 to 20 years. So you can do the math, 1,500 this year, it'll be 3,000 next year, 4,500, 6,000. You're talking about taking this town and quadrupling it in about 4 years. We must prepare for that.
And to kind of attest to this, about 5 or 6 years ago, if I remember right, Roanoke, and granted they do have industrial businesses out there, but their daytime population goes anywhere from 40 to 60,000 people. And that's, if I remember right, it was somewhere we had a static 7 to 9,000 in city. So with having two major highways like we do, that'd be a good ballpark number, is somewhere 40,000-ish. And we have two counties bringing those in. So I'm sure our daytime population is somewhere near there.
Okay, so 2 meetings ago, there was a motion on the floor, I guess, and the council approved what, 6,500, a raise of 6,500?
Correct. That took his salary to $79,500.
If we approve the new salary rates, was it option A or yeah, 1? When does that go into effect?
October 1.
And the chief's current salary, both of them are somewhere in the range of 85,000.
85,995. So you still have a delta of $6,495.
Does anyone have any comments on it?
I just feel like I've already voted on it a couple of times. And it is in the budget, which we will have completed very soon. And it will take effect in October. I don't have a problem with any of these wages, actually. And my problem is with the process. If I would tell you my problem with the process, I might offend a lot of people in this room. So I think I'll just send a letter to the administrator about what I think. And because it really has no bearing on what we're paying back. So.
All right. Any other comments? Can we move on yet? Okay.
I make a motion that we revisit. You said he's currently getting 79. I make a motion that we revisit to where, I don't know exactly how to word this, but his salary would be the 85.5.
So your motion would be to match the salary of the police chief?
Yes.
I thought they did vote on that.
No.
I moved
Meeting or so ago.
I move that we match the salary of the police chief effective immediately.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Loftus?
Abstain.
All right, number 2, Aurora request to process municipal court citations.
Thank you, Mayor. I would ask that we table this item. I received some information today that affects this, and I don't have all of the details at this point. So if we could table item 2.
Number 3, on-court transmission lines update.
So I'd like to just give you a brief update on some of the conversations that have been had. Excuse me. In your packet, you do have the map Nothing has really changed on Rhome's side of this other than the fact that there was a settlement conversation with all of the parties involved in this transmission line going east to west where it terminates down by Ramhorn Hill. And at least from what I'm hearing from Encore, their preferred route matches the ones that council prefers, which are south of our city, way, significantly south, which would not impact us financially, nor would it come through Old Town or Bywell or any of the other spots where they had originally anticipated. They did have and did mention the fact that several of the concerns, objections to the routing come east to west. So they have divided it up into 3 sections. Those areas near and east of 35 will be the first section. Then in the Justin area will be the second, and then they will come towards Rome. But at this point, it looks like it's still going the direction that we want it to go, but I wanted you all to at least have a brief update on this issue because it will continue, and at some point we may need to travel to Austin to testify in front of the PUC. It is, I did appear by virtual meeting this past week. However, with the number of people that are on the virtual hearing, if we have anything to say, it is not going to be heard. So that is something that we will look at as it gets closer to, but just giving you all an update on the progress of this topic this far.
Any questions? All right, number 4, budget and tax rate discussion. Again, city administrator.
So thank you, Mayor. This is only on the agenda in the event that council had any questions on the budget that I need to be prepared for, and or if you wanted to respond to anything that was said in the light of some of the public comments today. I just reserved the space in case you all wanted to have a discussion.
Can you explain, I know this has been covered multiple times during the meeting, but can you explain why and when we might have actuals and why we don't have actuals for 22 to 23?
So, well, we're still in 23. It doesn't close until the end of this month, or excuse me, the end of September.
You're not referring to actuals from 2021 to 2022?
We have those actuals.
Correct.
From the audit? We don't have an audit.
The audit's not going to give you your budget to actuals. It's going to look at clumps of your money and how they roll it up, but it's not going to go line by line and give you budget to actuals. That is at the back of the room for 21-22 fiscal year. 22-23 will come in the next fiscal year once we close that out, and we are preparing for 23-24. So that's the budget that you have in front of you. To the question of how do you budget when you don't have an audit, if we were using fund balance for anything, or if we were running a deficit budget, that might be a different story, but we're not. We have an excess of revenues over expenditures, as I explained at our last meeting, and as long as we stay within those parameters, we are required to pass a budget. Otherwise, we revert to the previous year's budget. That's not going to be beneficial to anyone in many instances. So you still have to move this forward. As mentioned, we are not the only city that does not have their FY 21-22 audit finished. Fairview is still working on theirs. I believe Boyd is still working on theirs. The requirement that we have to finish an audit within X amount of time after the fiscal year is an ordinance that council passed. It is not a state law.
Yeah, it is. 103.003. It is in state statute.
I
Under
will have
local
to
government code.
research that and agree
Okay.
to disagree
It's
because that is not what the attorney
1003.
has given us yet.
If you want to write it down, it's 1003.003 because after you questioned it before, I looked it up. And it is 180 days is when it's due after the end of the fiscal year.
And you're saying that's
Our
a
ordinance is
state
120
requirement.
days. That is a state requirement. It's under local government code.
Well, I'll be happy to research that. I have talked to many people about this topic and I have not had that feedback from anyone. So I can bring that information to you at a later meeting since we are not really set up to research that at this time. But as far as the audit being finished in order to budget, this is how you accomplish that.
So since multiple cities have not had theirs done this year, what's the violation? What are they going to do for all these cities?
They would take the same approach that we're taking.
Can I speak to this for just a second? So this goes to the point of losing employees. As y'all recall, last August, we had our city administrator leave. I stepped in to fill that role. And at the time, there was a change in financing. We went to uh, combined audit, consolidated cash. We did that just before the end of the fiscal budget year, which was probably a mistake on my part that I pushed that through. So we've been scrambling ever since to try to make that work. That's why it's so important to have somebody with the intelligence, the knowledge, the experience that knows how these things work. Um, I didn't have that. I did the very best I could, but if we're behind, it's probably something that I did. And I know Ms. DeGan has been working with the finance people and their auditors to get us in the position where every year it's just very simple to go year to year. We just haven't had that before.
I'd just like to point out that New Fairview also lost their city administrator. I would like to commend the city administrator for the information we have this year. Having looked at the budgets from the other side of this desk for the past couple of years, I know this is the best information I think I've seen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and hopefully we can improve in the future. I do see where there are some headings that are inconsistent between these reports that might make it more clear. The other thing I wanted to comment on was specific line items dealing with maintenance of streets, equipment, and machinery, where we have had history, it appears, of not spending that entire budget during the year. So I have a concern about that. We had that money available. Hopefully we can have a triage of the streets in Rome. And I think you mentioned that at the last meeting. And we can make sure we get those funds allocated and used. That's my concern. Because if we talk about doing streets and we put money at it, if we don't get it done, it doesn't do much good.
I completely agree with you, but I also understand that streets cost, especially up Morris, is probably going to be $1 million or more. I mean, so it's either like we fix potholes or we spend $1 million. There's nothing in between. That's what.
There's not $1 million in here. There's like 120,000.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
But I'm saying we didn't even spend 120.
That's what I'm trying to say is, what are you going to spend the 125,000 on if it's going to cost $1 million?
That's just to tell us.
And I do think back to the conversation of getting a street survey and making sure that we know how many miles of street we are required to maintain and what the lifespan of those are. That will give the city and the council some predictability in what that looks like in your capital improvement plan. These are all items, as Mr. Loftus says, are next gen budget for next year. We are doing everything we can to address some of the concerns that I heard had been brought up by previous councils about not having enough data on the budget. It took a considerable amount of time to back build some of this in spreadsheet form so that it could be used. So we're getting there. It's just going to take a couple of cycles before we get it as healthy as we'd like to see it, or as consistent in those numbers and in the format of the budget, so that the transparency is clear. Budgeting at the municipal level is difficult, regardless of what you're doing, regardless of your experience. But I have gone to great pains to put a section on the web called Budget and Taxes that probably has 8 subpages that explains the entire processes that you all have been through in looking at this budget and the decisions that have been made and the direction that we've received, and the documents are out there and the charts are out there and links to the presentation. So if anyone's not seeing it, I would really encourage them to look on the website and read that for themselves.
Yes, I am questioning. I want to know what we're not being transparent about. You can say that you're not transparent and it not be true, but I just need to know in what area we're not being transparent. How, I mean, why are they saying that?
I don't have specifics on that topic.
My thoughts are relative to a budget and an audit. You know, an audit's really looking at the past transactions that have taken place, making sure everything is correct, versus a budget is a planning tool.
Mm-hmm.
It's how we're going to plan on spending our revenues next year. And they really are two independent things. I can see where they could exist independently. I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem if we didn't have a budget at all, because fail to plan to fail, right? I guess the thing that I've looked at with the fresh information from last week, I do not believe this budget justifies a de minimis rate based on what I've seen. And I just wanted to make that statement. I think what it comes down to for me is what type of a cushion may be needed. For instance, I don't believe we will be collecting sales tax as well as we did this year. We might have another 5% cutback or something like that, I would guess, just speculation. And then I see where with the current rate, we probably have about a cushion of about $40,000, $50,000 I'm seeing in the budget. Yeah, those are round figures. And so the question is, to me, as a group, as a council, what kind of cushion do we believe we need? And maybe that's a question for the city administrator also.
It is a financial policy question that council is going to have to address at some point. A lot of your cities that are small and large will look at 90 days in reserves. For me, given the volatility in the market and in economic times at the moment, I prefer 120. I do believe that by the time we talk on the 14th, I will know where we're at in those reserves, and I will know what it costs a day to run this city. So therefore, I can tell you how much you have in that particular account. As far as the de minimis rate and whatever council decides to do, the budget was not built on that rate. So anything you collect over and above could be put towards projects as we discussed, but you don't have to do that. The only alternative is, as Mrs. Ty said, if we go out and attempt to fix the west plant, or we attempt to fix roads and streets that are failing, we don't have any reserves for that. So we would have to look at a bond and see if that's something that the citizens would support. There are a lot of variables in this budgeting process. One of the other things I'd like to see us get to is a 5-year projection on where do we think our revenues and expenditures and staffing needs will be over 5 years. We've not had that level of analysis before, and that's normal for a city that's growing. We are completely on track, and we are doing so much better as we continue to grow and we continue each iteration of the budget. So I'm hopeful that next year we'll have a lot of these bases already fixed, and then I can bring you those projections, just so that you know what staffing needs are predicted to be, what those costs may be, and then council makes those decisions to move those chess pieces on the board from there as to service delivery demand. Do you want to expand any programs? Think code enforcement. That was one of the conversations that we heard here recently, is we have heard from residents multiple times that we have a code enforcement issue, but we do not have any resources put towards code enforcement. So council will need to consider as we go along, what do we want to do in that particular realm? We don't have a deep bench in any department where we can pull someone who's not already engaged in another job or process. So we don't have any downtime. Case in point, in City Hall, Julie and Shayna are the only two who can back each other up on water bills and payments coming in. Christy's the only one who really knows how the municipal court runs. Ostensibly, you should have somebody with at least a working knowledge of those areas in case one or both are gone or something, they take vacation. We don't have enough people in there, nor am I recommending it. I want to be very clear, but that in a larger organization, you would have that redundancy. So if council decides they want to expand service delivery and provide for some code enforcement, we either have to hire someone full, part-time, or contract them to do it. Otherwise, we don't have the staff to handle it. So those are the type of things that as our budget continues to evolve and as we start to do some strategic looking forward, then we need to tie the budget to the strategies that council has laid out for staff to achieve so that we can make sure that we're circling that all the way back around and we're achieving what we've been asked to do as well. Right now, we are struggling to meet the basics. That's also not necessarily abnormal, but we need a plan forward because we can't keep doing this in perpetuity. I believe Mrs. Ty made the statement that if we don't fix the infrastructure, the community is going to have a problem, and at some point it may die on the vine. And I will tell you that I have developers come in. One of the first questions they ask me is, what is the city doing about wastewater and water? So the word is out that we have challenges in those areas, and it probably, I believe it is impacting whether or not we get businesses drawn here or not.
So I know that you're getting the numbers together for the 43 cents, like right
The current,
the,
the
below
43,78815,
exactly.
that's the
What-
amount we're at now. That's the tax rate now.
So, Mr. Loftus, what number are you thinking? Should she get numbers for another tax rate?
From what I've got a spreadsheet. It depends on what kind of cushion you want. It's really what it amounts to. I see a sweet spot at a rate of 0.365. That would give you a cushion of about
The current rate is 4319.
correct.
The current rate is 43,78815. The de minimis rate is set at 504,186, which would generate that $500,000 for projects only at council's direction. You also have, when I ran the numbers at the voter approval tax rate, that will actually reduce our revenue by about 50,000. That's just the quirk of the INS dropping, because as I mentioned to you, we've paid off debt and we will pay off more debt this year. So the INS rate will drop this year and the next unless council and the community issues debt. So if you go with what's the voter approval rate, it will actually take about $46,421 out of our budget.
And what is the voter approval rate?
That is the rate that
I mean,
if
what is the number?
335,372.
And I'm confused because it said on the sheet that on one of the PowerPoint slides, it said that 33, the voter approval rate would give us 3.5% more revenue than we had last
It
year.
normally would have from the standpoint of overall, but
Tax
because you're,
values, or because of the house values. I'm sorry.
if the INS rate had held steady, I would be able to give you a more easy comparison. But because it dropped considerably from 21 to 12, that is affecting all of these numbers.
So my understanding, when we made the motion and voted last week to go ahead and post for the de
minimis, yes.
rate, it was to do so just to give notice.
Correct.
Just in case we went that way, because
Correct.
we knew that we had to give notice. So I would like to see somewhere in between.
So I did run the numbers as Mr. Shoemake asked at if you all maintain the same rate where you're at now, and that would generate approximately $334,000 in general fund because your INS rate has gone down. It would be a difference from last year's levy of about $211,000, and that understand that's affected by how many people are disabled or over 65 or have other exemptions. So you're not going to be able to lay those down on the table side by side and compare them. We also have the same software that the county has. So I didn't calculate these numbers. I put it in the software and let it run it so that it tells me, because you're right, that sheet is extremely convoluted. So if you decided to adopt the voter approval rate, which is the one that is often, as the mayor said, 3.5% higher, going to generate another 3.5%. When I plugged in that number and our new INS rate, it actually shows a reduction of 46,000. If, as we mentioned before on the de minimis, we posted for that just for that very reason, to preserve the option for council. I even sent you all the ad that we put in the paper right next to it, because it is so difficult to understand all of these different terms, to let residents know that this was not something council had settled on, that this was just preserving you all the option, and it very well may be lower. I was very happy that the messenger was able to put them side by side, so that hopefully that helped people understand. But the no new revenue rate is actually lower than the voter approval, excuse me, it is higher than the voter approval rate. So that's, if you adopt one or the other, you have to go with the voter approval rate, which is the 3,35372. If you go with the no new revenue rate of 35400, it's above the voter approval rate, which could be petitioned for an election, which would throw us into November. And if it's voted down, it goes to the voter approval rate anyway, which is where we built the budget. So it's just a council's decision as to if you want to generate any additional funds, as Mr. Loftus says, to either put in reserves for a project or to allocate for a project. We did look at a long list of things that need to be addressed in the community, but we've prioritized infrastructure.
I say that our current tax rate is about what you're thinking. It's about midpoint between the voter and the de minimis rate. I think it's a little bit less to be exactly in the middle, but our current one's about right where you're thinking.
Last year's rate, though, that's based on what the values were last year. Our values have gone up this year.
I think the conversation is if you held it steady. A lot of cities do that. For instance, when I was preparing for tonight's meeting, I was looking at North Lake's budget, and they're at 0.295000, and they've held that rate for 25 years, regardless of any expansion in the tax base, which is how they provide funds for a growing community, because they have definitely grown, as we have seen with our own eyes, and as Mrs. Mize brought up, from the standpoint of their population growth. So it's not unusual for cities to hold a tax rate. Boyd is holding the same tax rate this year as they did last year.
Do North Lake, or have North Lake and Boyd also brought forward bond projects? Do you know?
I don't know about North Lake, but Boyd they do have bonds because they are investing in their infrastructure. That, in my opinion, is why they have seen the growth in their tax base from the standpoint of commercial. Restaurants, personal care salons, things of that nature have come to Main Street in Boyd more so than it's come to Main Street in Rhome.
And that's the whole issue. We need infrastructure to get those businesses in, to help fund our taxes, bring the homeowners' taxes down. I mean, that's our ultimate goal. I mean, correct?
You have to have a diversification in your tax base. Right now, I have not been able to run the numbers, but we don't have a lot of industry in Rhome that balances and takes that load off the residents. When we have QT go online, I was able to pull the confidential tax report, and I do have a good idea what that may generate for us in revenue. I think we're right on track with where I've predicted sales and use tax for this year, so we should hit the number that I have in the budget. If anything else comes in, I have had some conversations with some other retail and or commercial businesses that are looking, then of course all that gets factored in and built into. But yes, that diversification is critical, because the residents cannot bear the entire brunt. You need more of a 60-40 split, residential and commercial.
I would be okay with us keeping the tax rate the same so that we could put that money towards infrastructure or street or.
Yeah, if you keep it the same, I think you're looking at a cushion of about 250 to 270,000 based on the increased property tax rates. That's was my justification for going just a little lower, 0.365. But
You're saying 0.365 was going to give us 200 or the 43? 100,000.
I can run that number, Mr. Loftus, in the software. That'd be nice. 36 what?
What you said, 0.365.
that's what I'm looking at. We maintain the same rate of all property tax revenues.
So do you want us to get bonds then for the infrastructure, for roads and everything? Is that what is that your
Absolutely. I
idea?
think that's the only way we can do it. And then it's up to the citizens of Rome. But I think we need to give some thought in how we present these bonds for approval, not do them as one lump sum.
I'm curious what the city administrator's thoughts are as using the bond money versus the tax rate money for the project.
The bond, if you issue debt, as I have stated in print and in these meetings, it spreads the load over 20 or 30 years. That is by far a wonderful tool for cities to use. You do not want the 1,800 or 1,900 people who are living here now or doing business here now to try and fund $8 million worth of infrastructure for the West Plant. You want that to be paid out over all the people who are going to flush their toilet and brush their teeth and send water to the West Plant for 20 or 30 years. We do have a misunderstanding in this community of how debt is used by cities. That's why we've tried to put things on the website. That's why we've tried to put things out on social media. There's been some concern that the city is heavily in debt, and we're not heavily in debt for a municipality at all. It comes out of two different accounts of money, for one thing. As I mentioned to you all, at coming fiscal year, we'll have less than $500,000 in debt in the general fund. We'll have almost, with interest, about $3.5 million in utility fund that will get paid off over the life of that loan. But it is so much more manageable to issue debt and pay that out. The challenge that I know or have been told that Rome has faced in the past is when bonds were put forward for infrastructure, they were petitioned and voted down. And that's difficult when people don't understand that that West Plant is absolutely past its lifespan. And we cannot hook up anything else to the West Plant at this point or fix the I&I runoff that we've discussed without funding to do it. There's no place to squeeze it in the budget.
So that is my concern. If bonds, if, and if we keep the same tax rate, does that also have to be voter approved?
Yes. If it's petitioned. Let me clarify that. And I don't know how people feel about that. I've tried to be transparent, for lack of a better word, on what council has said that money would be used for. It would not go to the salary concerns that people have expressed. It would not go to anything in general fund that currently exists. Anything over and above would be set aside for those projects only. I'm hopeful that at the end of the next 6 weeks, we have a clear understanding of all of the funds that the city has, all the ones that are restricted and that are not for use for general day-to-day operations, and what they're to go for, because I don't think we've done a good job explaining that in the past, but that again is part of our evolutionary growth process as a city. So if it is voted down again, I really don't know what we're going to do.
Yeah, relative to the West Plant and everyone who uses the West Plant, if it's not there, I mean, we're going to have to start putting in septic systems. Something. I mean, that's What has to happen?
That would seem like that's the case, but the homes on the smaller lots do not have enough room for a septic.
I just wanted to comment that putting in a septic tank is around $25,000. So if you even want to extrapolate that over 20 years, going with the bond issue is quite a savings.
I did reach out to our financial advisor today and I asked the question of, okay, what happens if the council issues $1 million in debt? How much is the repayment for that at the current rates? And it's about $75,000 to $80,000 a year. So the latest engineering estimate that we had for the west plant to be replaced was between $6 and $8 million, depending upon what could be reused. The east plant is in great shape to be expanded as developers come in. I actually had a resident inquire about that this week, and I've copied you all on the explanation, but the east plant is compartmentalized and it is in the position it needs to be in to be expanded pretty much at the developer's expense as they come in and require that. It can handle our city load. So if a new developer comes in and they want to put Prairie Point on the map, they know they're going to have to pay to expand that plant. That's not at the city's expense. We don't have that luxury at the west plant. I did approach P&B about paying for an upgrade to the west plant that Mr. Pinkoff's found a less expensive solution for their property. So we're not able to partner with him on that. Yes, there are grants that may be available, but grants take a long time to get, and I don't know how much longer we have to wait. As I mentioned to you all before, we're still dealing with the 2016 issue on the West plant that wasn't completely addressed that could net us between $75,000 and $100,000 in fines. Jesus, you have something to add to that? So this is why when you asked about prioritization of projects, I know we've discussed things like facilities and others. We're not ready for that yet. We've got to tend to the water and the wastewater first.
I wanted to bring something up. I would say Sean was still here, so it was a year ago or so. We received a letter from TCQ saying that the city, for 20 years or since 1998, sorry, they have, I guess the word would be neglect, saying, yeah, we're fixing I-9, we're fixing I-9. And TCQ said, you're done, you're gonna fix it. So, sorry, we're at the point where if this continues, you're not looking at like notifications. It'd be a fine every day. It could be 60,000. It could be 100,000. It could be whatever number you want to put that keeps the state put. You're no longer you're no longer.
I think our grace period is up at this point.
We're 20 years past that, and it's very, very serious.
So this is why we've prioritized this and brought it forward for council, because some of you are new, some of you have been hearing this before, and I don't think we can overstate the need to get that west plant going in some form or fashion. And as I mentioned to you all, I talked with a company that leases those to purchase. I'm not sure that it actually saves us any money as I've run that out over the years, but it's something that we're going to have to look at. And I know Mrs. Ty has asked for that sooner rather than later, and I have talked with the engineer, and all of those steps are being taken as we speak.
So, yes, that process has started for the wastewater and the water,
Right.
correct? Okay.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, I just like to say the de minimis rate gets us nowhere near
Correct.
what we need.
That is true. The de minimis rate, from my standpoint, coupled with the 120 or so that was allocated in this year's budget for streets, it would be my recommendation that we look at marrying that money to what we already had in the budget, which would give us about 620, that we might be able to do something on streets, but we may not be ready for that yet. I'm still trying to figure out where we can partner with the county. But we have a lot of moving parts that are coming very, very quickly, and I've not had time to sit down with our county commissioner and find out what are the costs associated with that. Mr. Johnson's been great about getting me in touch with some folks and giving me some suggestions. So we're still working on that particular piece of the budget.
Do we have, with the timeline, do we have time to wait for a bond to pass?
For the streets, yeah,
For
I
the
mean,
water.
certainly. For the wastewater, we're going to have to push forward grants and bonds at the same time, and we're going to have to educate the residents why that's needed. I don't know how that's been done in the past, but I do know that this community has had a few voted down, and we have to make sure that we're very clear on the facts so that people can make an informed decision.
Are there some rules, for instance, if we do go with a bond, what are the rules for instance, any one of us here on the council getting out in public and saying why it's needed, the justification? Are we allowed to campaign?
No. So as council members, you are allowed to state the facts of the bond. You can publicize the need. It was my understanding, for instance, when the facilities bond was put forward a few years ago, that the city administrator at the time was either under the impression or told not to put any photos of the inside of the school. I don't know which that was, but that was one of the things that was conveyed to me. That is allowable. You cannot tell people how to vote, and you cannot sway their opinion. The city can put out facts. The school is X years old, or the wastewater treatment plant is X years old. Here are photos of it. Here are the fines that we've received. Here's what we're planning. Here's the bond amount necessary. And yes, you can put out that information. But we can't wear t-shirts that say vote for the bond and go out and campaign for that. Other residents can do so, and I have seen that in cities. You've seen it as well. Think back to the Northwest School Board election that just went on. Think to the one in Decatur. You saw people form as a group and put out advertisements for or against to get their message out. That is not something that the city is allowed to do, and unfortunately you as council members need to stay neutral.
And this might be a question for Carvin, but is it not that we can state the need and our opinions prior to the election being called?
Yes, I believe so, but that would be something we'd want to check with Carvin, yes.
And at what point can we get this? I mean, could it be on the November election?
I don't know, I'd have to check.
Yeah, closed August the 21st.
Then maybe not.
So when is Hilltop Securities coming out to,
Trying to get through the budget first before we go that direction, and I need some hard numbers because the last information we had from the engineer is now at least a year old. I believe he presented in July of 2022 to you all about this issue, and so he's going to have to update those and get them to us.
Mrs. Mize, did you have a question? Make it quick. That was in May of 2021.
We were not fixing it. We were dealing with the bare minimums from TCEQ's requirements, but we were not fixing the plant.
The agenda packet.
Well, I wasn't here, so I can't speak to that, but I know looking at the documents that I have and talking to the engineer, I have been told that council went with the minimum required for the plant. They did not authorize the $5 or $6 million to actually replace it or rehab it. Well, we do have a bond from 2019 that we are paying. That was for the east plant.
That was for the east side. This was in 2021, May of 2021, that
I understand.
they went up on the rates.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I have an issue with the back and forth, back and forth. I would prefer that we not do that with the audience. I prefer that comments be made during the public comment section.
Until we have a public hearing.
We had
See that too.
I'm going to
Mrs.
explain.
Gann.
We've had two presentations on the water and wastewater. Can you hear me? Yes. So the first one was for the wastewater. And that was a year prior. Well, when the next one came around, and I'm only guessing about it's approximately a year. When the next one came around, that's when we raised the water rates.
Right.
But I was confused by that too because I didn't understand why raising the wastewater rates and then coming back and raising the water rates was only going to give us a minimum when they told us in the prior presentation that we were going to get this huge wastewater wastewater. Exactly.
It
No,
appears to me that the ongoing problem is the community wants services. They want infrastructure. They're not happy with the services and the infrastructure that they're receiving, but they don't want any money spent. Not getting us anywhere. So if we do not come together as a team, as a city and community, for something, have to be for something. If you are for services, then you have to be for working together to, to raise the money to provide those services. We cannot continue to be against everything. Again, with the comments from the audience.
I understand. Any other budget questions that I can answer?
It seems like in a negotiation, you gotta have something cause action by the people. And it would seem like we might be able to use the TCEQ to somehow and their threats to the city and publish that to citizens. Give us that would give us some negotiation leverage in a bond issue.
I think you did mention that listing all the violations that TCEQ has given us as a information, transparency, things like that. But
Can't you
I
just
mean,
pull the? I don't
well,
think
not
very many people go to that
yeah.
level. They prefer to find it at the local level.
You can do that, but it's easier for people to see it on the Facebook page, on the website. They're not going to go through all of that. And then they get misinformation from people. I want the facts out there.
Is that something that we could do similar to the budget numbers, put a link on the website to the TCEQ report and publicize that, give an explanation?
I can look into it, sir.
We got a public hearing on this August the 14th, or I'm sorry, September 14th. All right, let's go executive session. Section 551.071.
Mayor, I don't mean to interrupt, but I don't have anything. I did not get any information on that. So if you prefer not to read all this, we could defer this to the next meeting.
Works for me. So nothing on executive session.
Not at this time.
Okay. Future agenda items. Nothing. All right. Motion to adjourn. Second.
Second.
It is 7:18. This meeting is adjourned.
We have to have a vote.
Oh, that's right. Go.
Aye.
Very good. I didn't hear any nays. All right. Keys are there.